Thank you so much all for joining this Coffee in Good Company. This is a series of coffee conversations we've been having over the last 5 or 6 months, actually, which originated because at BLab Europe, we had so many interesting people we wanted to talk to about how they were thinking about what we would call stakeholder governance, or how to make a company run in the interests of everybody it serves or affects, not just the shareholders. And we thought, well, rather than have the conversation just on our own one-to-one, it'd be much better to share the conversation with others. And this has been really exciting and interesting sort of dialogues that we've had. We just have a snapshot of people's lives, what they're doing, the work they're involved in. And the aim of this actually is, on a bigger picture, is that we have this opportunity with the European Union to help shape how they are seeing corporate governance in the future. And this has been the underpinning of our sort of investigation, really, if you like, or discussions into how to run a company in the interests of everybody. So we've created this Interdependence Coalition, which is really a group of organizations, networks, businesses, academics, lawyers, who are advocating that we should mandate for all companies to be run in the interests of the different people for whom it affects and for the environment, and not just in the interests of stakeholders. And we'll be putting a link to the chat in the for the Interdependence Coalition for you to see in a minute. But just that's the sort of underpinning of how these conversations are helping us to understand more what's really at stake, what is at stake. The stake is the key issue here. And it's a real pleasure to have this morning Maria van der Heide from ShareAction. Maria is a real expert in policy and heads up the EU policy work in Brussels for ShareAction. And I've been a great fan of ShareAction and all their work when I used to work with them over in the UK. And I'm super impressed Maria manages to keep hold of so many different files and dossiers that the EU are working on. But she has also been really focused and is part of our coalition for this mandatory consideration that businesses must take to run the business in the interests of everybody. So Maria, it's wonderful to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us for Coffee Good Company. How are you this morning? All good?
Thanks. I'm fine. Yeah, and thank you very much for the invitation. Exciting to have this chat with you and to speak to the B Corp community, which is quite essential to have that voice also represented in the policy debate. And I'll speak to that a bit more later on.
Indeed, absolutely, Maria. Just maybe just give us a brief idea of ShareAction's work, what you were set up to do, and what you're doing in your day job, so people have a little bit of an understanding of the agenda you're working to.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So as you said, my name is Maria van der Heide, head of EU policy in Brussels. At ShareAction, I lead the advocacy work on the sustainable finance agenda, and I will later on explain a bit more in detail what that entails. It's a lot, as you said, and ShareAction is an NGO founded in the UK in 2005, then as Fair Pensions, with the aim to challenge pension funds to adopt responsible investment policies. And a couple of years later, in 2013, the organization became ShareAction, and the focus expanded from pension funds to the broader investment sector. So our broader goal is to create a financial system that serves people and planet, and we do so through defining the higher standards for responsible investment, and to also make sure that these are upheld by industry. Thematically, we work well on the biggest challenges that we are faced with today, so climate change, biodiversity loss, but also more social elements such as broadly inequality, the quality of work, and also public health. And we have various ways to achieve these goals, and we think that they all have different roles to play, and they're all interconnected. So you may know us from our financial sector rankings, which we publish on pension funds, insurers, asset managers, and banks, rating them how well they are doing with regards to sustainability, or ESG. that is environment, social, and governance factors. We also build campaigns together with different investors. We build coalitions to have them engage with companies on business practice. Our networks team work with charities and universities in their journey towards responsible investment. And we also work with civil society organizations across Europe to support them in engagement in their discussions about responsible investment in their different countries. Mm-hmm. Lastly, and this is my focus, we advocate for legislation that supports responsible investment, because we think we can have these conversations. We can do the naming and shaming, or knowing and showing, whichever you prefer. Through our rankings, we can engage with the investors directly, but it's also important to make sure that a certain standard is embedded in legislation. And so we do that in the UK and in the EU.
Wonderful. What a huge brief, and it couldn't be more relevant. I mean, it is absolutely the moment, isn't it? It's one thing to be talking about how the businesses need to consider these different dimensions of social and environmental impact. But if the financial sector is in a different place with different agenda and different set of regulations or legislative compulsions, it's not going to actually hang together. So couldn't be. And it's wonderful that we're so aligned on this. Maria, just there's so much going on in the world at the moment, and I know you've actually just had a week's holiday, so I hope you managed to switch off from it. But in jumping back into the world, I don't know if you're seeing anything across your desk at the moment that's going on in the world that is going to be influencing what you're going to be working on, or is it all connected to some of your work? I'm thinking particularly of COP, but there may be other areas of things. It's not just COP at the moment.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a few exciting initiatives coming from COP. Of course, we still. I saw that the first draft text is there this morning. I haven't read that yet, so I guess there we still have to wait and see how ambitious that will be. But a few interesting initiatives coming from COP so far with regards to biodiversity and deforestation, also to stop public finance of the fossil fuel industry. So that is really, really interesting. But something else, and actually that is a trend that I think we have seen in the past years or so, but especially in 2021. I think the interest from investors to really now take a next step in terms of their engagement with companies is becoming visible. I myself, I'm from the Netherlands, and it was quite big news a couple of weeks ago that one of the biggest pension funds in the world, ABP, decided to divest from Shell. This was of course really interesting, especially because a few months before they still said that they were engaging with them, and then they saw some results from that engagement. But now they've decided to divest, and there was actually an article yesterday in the Financial Times also summarizing different actions that investors have been taken to now moving on from having friendly conversations and actually taking the next steps in divesting directly or threatening to divest. So that is quite exciting to see that. At the same time, still a lot remains to be done.
Interesting. And I think this whole sort of discussion point about divestment is increasingly getting more and more, I think, heated. I don't know if we'll go into that now. I mean, if anyone is really interested in the chat, please do put questions for Maria or comments as we go. But it does feel a really big topic, as whether you should actually stay in there and help with your vote and your share, your stake in that company to make the difference, or whether you should divest and clean yourself of any of these fossil fuels or others. Yeah, very interesting about the focus at COP, I think, on nature and biodiversity, which was the first time in 26 COPs that they'd had a special whole day related to the role of nature and biodiversity, which at the moment has only 3% of all funding. attached to it is through for nature. So I think there was a lot of NGOs and other movements at COP who are really excited about that focus and see it so much as part of both the solution and the need for attention. So that's very exciting. I wonder if you could also just give us a sense. I mean, we're here because we're both aligned on this vision of what's the possible with the European Commission. Could you just give a little bit more of a sense of how you see these two different arms coming together? What's going on in the corporate governance world and what's going on in the sustainable finance world? I know you're very across both these files. What's the possibility and what's the risk here, do you feel, from the EU point of view, legislative point of view?
Thanks. Yeah, no, that's a very good and interesting question. So what you see in the broader sustainable finance agenda, so as a bit of a background, the EU published in 2018 its sustainable finance agenda, with the aim to steer money away from harmful business and towards the just transition. In order to do that, they need to focus on the real economy and the investment industry at the same time. And you see that there is certain legislation that is aimed at the real economy, and there is legislation that is aimed at investors specifically. And then you see that very often investors are also in scope for the real economy legislation. So more specifically, discussions are now, as probably people are aware of, happening around sustainable corporate governance. Then there's a proposal that was launched earlier this year by the Commission about corporate sustainability reporting, and of course the details will still need to be discussed and agreed upon. But generally, we can expect that investors and financial institutions will also be in scope. So of course there is why it is so important is I mean, they're all interlinked, and then there's a lot of discussions about sequencing. There is already a disclosure regulation. So one of the key elements of this sustainable finance package from 2018, one is the taxonomy that we will maybe get to speak about later still. Another one is a sustainable finance disclosure regulation. Investors say, why do we already have legislation if the disclosure regulation for companies is not yet there, because we need their data to be able to comply with the regulation. So there's a lot of conversation about what is the right sequence, and we first need that legislation enter into force before we can live up to it. But generally, you see that steps are being taken towards more reporting, more transparency, but also stricter requirements on financial institutions and the real economy alike to, for instance, in sustainable corporate governance, for instance, the link remuneration to sustainability, which hopefully is in there, but we're not yet sure of that. And so, yeah, they're closely connected, and the legislation that is focused on the real economy, the financial institutions need that data to be able to comply with the legislation. But more importantly, of course, the ultimate aim of that legislation is to steer money away from what is harmful and to steer it towards more sustainable practices. And for that the other legislation is key.
Is key. So there's just this window of opportunity, isn't there, to sort of almost align the pieces of the puzzle, both on the business side and on the investor side, and not just to line those two, but also to get the sequencing right. So we embed the duties and the obligations into what the companies must then do and what they must then report on, and
yeah.
Then investors must look and seek to report on what they are actually investing in. So if we can pull this off, it will be quite a hierarchy of consensus and of I would say coordination. But I guess there's a risk, isn't there, Maria? You've seen these EU legislative initiatives come and go. What's your feeling about this particular sort of package that we're looking at? Do you feel it's hopeful? Do you see parts of this at risk?
I think there is always pushback from some actors, mostly industry, from regressive companies that don't feel like embracing sustainability goals. Then there are some like yourself that do see the need to do it, that do recognize the urgent crisis that we have ahead of us, but can also see opportunities in that. The challenge is always legislation is never perfect from the start, and you're, to a certain extent, you're always running behind the facts. What is important is that people recognize that we cannot wait until we have the perfect solution. We already waited for way too long. And we just need to, even if it's an imperfect sequence, or we don't have the perfect data, or we don't have the perfect formulas, the perfect models, etc. We just need to do something now. And what is also an important message is that, yes, in 2018, the Commission started with this very ambitious plan, which also involved the EU taxonomy. But it's really important to conclude that this project is not yet done. We have not achieved, we're not anywhere near what we need to achieve in terms of steering the money away, and a lot of discussions need to be held. And we really hope that the EU will maintain its leadership role and is also daring to take that action, even if imperfect. But yeah, it's too late to wait for voluntary self-regulation. We've given industry a lot of time to do that, and you see that the uptake generally is quite disappointing. So now we need to take the next step and come up with legislation that may sometimes be difficult to implement, but we need that to be able to make progress.
Make progress, exactly, yes. And I mean, I don't know how people on the call feel, but I think this sense of combined urgency and real frustration and to some degree anger. I think Obama was saying at COP, you know, to the young people, you should keep that anger. I mean, use it well, but keep that anger. And I think there is that sense that if the EU don't pull this off and don't actually come up with something meaningful, there will be anger that we are left with an economy and a financial system that just doesn't serve people or planet. I mean, I wonder what you were also mentioning, I think, about we've talked a lot actually about the environmental kind of measures that are going to be sort of built into the taxonomy. What do you feel about the social taxonomy, the idea of what really counts as social benefit? Is that sort of as developed in the EU mind?
Yeah, in the EU, I should say that there is a broader focus on ESG. So not only on the environment or on climate. So you see that, for instance, in the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, which is focused on all three. Now also the proposal on non-financial reporting or corporate sustainability reporting is also focusing on ESG. But for the taxonomy, for now, there's only a focus on environmental factors. The European Commission have mandated the EU Sustainable Finance Platform to look into the options to develop a social taxonomy, to define what can be considered socially sustainable activities. And we're actually waiting for that final report to be shared, and then based on that report, the Commission will decide whether they actually want to develop such a social taxonomy, which is of course very key, because we have in the investment industry, you see that yes, there is more awareness, also supported by COVID almost, to also take social considerations into account. However, the clear narrative, the clear focus will need to be discussed more broadly, and a social taxonomy will definitely help with that, in trying to get a clearer idea on what it actually entails. So we are really hopeful that the Commission will indeed embrace this, and then hopefully they will also decide to to give it the urgency it needs, because of course the environmental and the social crisis, they are interlocking. I mean, I worked for human rights organizations for many years. I've seen myself the devastating impact on poverty and food security in many countries all over the world that are already happening due to climate change. So it's really important that these two are taken together and that we do not wait too long with developing further the social side of it.
Social side, yeah. Actually, that refers nicely. Victoria from EcoVadis, I believe. Hello, Victoria. Nice that you're here. You just posed a really interesting question in the chat, which I think relates to this, which is about whether, I think, asking really if the EU taxonomy is actually going to go far enough. Is it just a baseline for companies' positive impact, or whether it really constitutes a strict minimum, and companies who want to do good will have to go well beyond that? Do you have a sense of that already? Maybe if we looked from the environmental's taxonomy, does it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I guess the answer is still kind of up in the air, especially because now conversations are still happening whether gas and nuclear will be included in the taxonomy, and can be, of course, with certain thresholds, but can be considered as sustainable, which of course is very problematic, and will also there's a risk for the credibility of the whole taxonomy project if that happens. So I guess I will be able to better answer that question in a few months' time, and of course then we have to see how it is being used once it's being fully implemented. But like I said, now we have the first element of the taxonomy, but this is a project that needs to be developed further. So the 4 other environmental objectives of the environmental taxonomy, of the green taxonomy, if you want, needs to be developed. Then there's also discussion about a potential harmful taxonomy alongside the social taxonomy. So that we have been an advocate of, because it's one thing to define what is sustainable, what is environmentally sustainable, but in order to really shift away from what is harmful, you also need to define what is harmful. And currently that doesn't exist. We do not have these agreed upon definitions. We don't have that shared vocabulary of what is harmful. So that will also be decided upon by the Commission early next year to see if they're going to develop that. And we think that you really need to have both pillars.
Yes.
So what is sustainable and what is not sustainable, to make sure that you shift funds from one to another.
Indeed. Yeah, that makes great sense. And that it's long lasting, that we're not viewing it with a very short-term lens, but somehow a bit like all standard settings. If you set a standard which is fine for now, but it rapidly becomes out of date because either we learn more, or perceptions, or civic acceptance, or the social contract just doesn't allow you to operate in it was once acceptable. The danger is these things have to totally, they have to be really nimble and iterate quickly. And I think that's something that the Commission, bless them, find difficult. But much better to have something to start with than nothing. And I'm just thinking, we're just coming near to the end of our time, but I wondered if you could just share a little bit about how do you feel people could get involved? Because some of this can feel really distant and remote. And I think just coming away from COP yesterday, I see Kate on the call from the UK, who's also been doing a lot of work with the B Corps in the UK in the financial sector, and their work there to sort of bring about new ways of financing and operating. I mean, what do you feel? How can we make the agenda that the EU are trying to address something we can really hook onto and be engaged in? And we obviously have the Interdependence Coalition. Are there other ways at just a personal level you feel, even inside companies, or what we're doing with our pensions, or any other things you can suggest that help us link?
Sure. Yes. No. There are many things that can be done at a company level or at a personal level. First of all, let me thank you for what you have been doing so far. It is really important that you that sounds about stakeholder engagement and how the stakeholder interests are considered by corporate boards. That is really, really important, especially because you see that there is a lot of pushback, and so please keep using those tools that are offered by the EU on consultations and share your thoughts and insights. It is one thing for NGOs like ShareAction to put forward their thoughts and to keep emphasizing the urgency that is there and why we cannot wait. Can you still see me?
I think you have frozen slightly. We can still hear you. I think you might come back in just a minute. Oops, lost you. So sorry, Maria. I'm not sure if you can see us.
But you can still hear me.
We can hear you. Yes, absolutely.
I don't know. There's a fail to start the camera. But since we only have a few minutes left, yeah. I suggest I'll just continue without
Please do.
Video. Sorry about that. So I think that is really, really important, because the NGO view is one, but really having like the practitioner perspective of what it means, and that also it can be done. And that for all those companies that are not yet willing to make the transition or do not prioritize it, arguing that it's just adding red tape and that it cannot be done, to give examples of how it can be done, and how it can be done successfully, and that still you can also combine stakeholder and shareholders' interest. So that of course is very important. So please keep doing that. Otherwise, on a personal level, yeah, please make sure to make this part of the conversations anywhere. It should be on everyone's agenda. And with regards to your pension funds, reach out to them. I can also share some links of what you can do more specifically. We offer toolkits on how you can get engaged with your pension fund, for instance, and which questions to ask them. You're also always happy to join ShareAction and to go to AGMs and ask questions there. So yes, there is a lot you can do, and I'm happy to refer you further to our website. But just please make sure to keep it part of conversations at birthday parties, in your company, with your bank, with your pension fund, etc. And if we all do that, then alongside the legislation and the broader discussion, I'm sure it's possible to make a change.
Brilliant. Maria, thank you for being such a wonderful advocate and helping us all navigate our way through this, and for all that you do behind the scenes. So much work has obviously gone on that people can't see, but it's massively important. And I hope everybody who's listening, and this will be recorded and shared on ShareAction channels and on our channels, will also feel motivated to be engaged. Just to say thank you again to Maria. Please join us next week. Actually, we are talking with Erin Safan, who is now with the Donut Economics Action Lab, and he'll be discussing his views on stakeholder governance, which will be really interesting, with my colleague Yeli Smed. So please join us for that. And please also keep an eye out on the Interdependence Coalition. Come and have a look at the site, see if you want to join us, follow our events. We're waiting for the Commission to come up with their proposal. And once that happens, there'll be a lot of action as we start to assess the extent to which it's really going far enough, and advocate for this mandatory obligation. So please keep in touch. Thank you to Lucia and Maria behind the scenes. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And I hope you have a lovely rest of the morning and enjoy your coffee. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.